Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning. I believe it's Friday morning, November the 26th. And I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. Chat room is open, and I put the link in there from what we were talking about yesterday, and that's myths about domestic abuse, and from Dave Decker from angerresources.com, www.angerresources.com, ANGERESOURCES.com. And that's a great website. So we're going to get right into that this morning. I'm not a counselor or therapist. I don't hold any certificates in that area. I'm just a private citizen, paying to do my own blog talk shows. And I really just want to be one more voice out here for people, for survivors of child abuse, really, and for people who may want to sort of know a little bit more about what goes on behind the scenes from one survivor, you know what I mean? So, and also to speak out against child abuse, right? So there was many reasons why I wanted to do these shows, and I thank everybody for tuning in. It's just awesome to have so many people listening to my show. I appreciate it very much. So I'm not a counselor or therapist. You have to listen at your own discretion. All of my topics that I talk about are very sensitive because I'm covering all the issues of abuse. And the topics of abuse are very sensitive, and a lot of people find it very hard to listen to. It might be uncomfortable for you. Some people find it very much distressing. So, and if you're a survivor and you're just in your, just beginning your healing journey, all of my shows can trigger people, to feel bad and might think about your own situation. And then, you have to make sure you're in a safe place when you're listening to my shows and that you won't injure yourself or injure someone else. That's why I always say, to make sure that you listen at your own discretion because, you have to know where you're at in your healing journey, right, so that you know you're comfortable enough to listen, right? Because the topics are scary, and see, for me, I lived through it, so, that was scary. Talking about it now is not scary. But because I lived through it, that was scary. So, but for a lot of people, if they haven't heard a whole lot about abuse, the topics of abuse can be pretty scary. So I just ask everybody to listen to my shows, at their own discretion, right? And young people under the age of 18, I ask that you have permission to listen to my show, mainly because there's a lot of adult content on my shows, and I believe that children should be protected at all times. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and we work to promote education and awareness, to educate the public on the signs and symptoms of abuse, how to report abuse, child abuse prevention, and just the whole thing. So we're working to help to fight to save children's lives. And if you're under the age of 18, you really should have someone listen to these types of shows with you just to make sure it's something you should be listening to. And also, if there's a chat room present, you want to make sure that you keep yourself safe because there's all kinds of crazy, sick individuals out there, people, men and women, who would like to get a hold of children and hurt them. So you have to be very, very careful what you're doing online, and that's why on my show I just want to promote internet safety. And so I ask anybody under the age of 18 that you would have someone listen to the show with you just to help you make a decision whether you should be listening or not. And hopefully you have someone in your life that cares about you, like a parent or caregiver, someone who cares about you enough to protect you and enough to want to know what you're listening to and what you're doing online. It's just so important. I know what it's like to have parents who don't care. So, I want you to, if you don't have a parent or a caregiver who cares, maybe get a teacher, counselor, someone that you trust, that's proven themselves trustworthy, to listen to the show and then help you decide whether you should be listening, okay? So thanks very much, everybody. I appreciate it. So we'll get right into this topic. And we were looking at it yesterday. This is, taking a look at the myths about domestic abuse, right? This is from Dave Decker. And there's quite a lot of information on this page. It's really quite good. There was myths about the issue of domestic abuse in general. Now we actually in the section called, right when you scroll down, called Myths About Women in Abusive Relationships, and that's where we left off. We were talking about yesterday the last one, which is number 14, women are responsible for the abuse they receive and somehow provoke, cause, or deserve the abuse. And that's a myth, and Dave Decker goes on to explain the reality of that women may become explosive and hurtful and say or do disrespectful and abusive things to their partners, but this still does not give men the right to batter them, nor does it justify a violent response. In fact, it says most women do whatever they can to avoid being abused. So that's a myth, that women are responsible for the abuse they receive and somehow provoke, cause, or deserve the abuse. But I've heard that, and we were talking about that yesterday. And the next myth is number 15, and that's where we left off. Abused women are emotionally unstable or mentally ill. And that's the myth, that people might think that abused women are emotionally unstable or mentally ill. And the reality, Dave Decker says, is often battered women present with severe depression, anxiety, and panic attacks, and low self-esteem. However, these symptoms frequently relate directly to the abuse that has been occurring in their lives, and often subside when the women begin to feel safe and empowered through their contact with advocates, support groups, and therapy to make changes necessary to protect themselves and their children and move on with their lives in a healthier way. And so, that I like that. That's so really probably true, that a lot of people think that abused women are just crazy and unstable and mentally ill, and that's not true at all. There might be some mental illness there, but the thing is that it would just be so much worse with abuse going on. You know what I mean? And my mom, when they were brought up on abuse charges, they were forced to go to court, and they both were forced to see a doctor and I believe probably a clinical psychiatrist, and they did take a look at both of my parents, and they actually diagnosed my mom as manic depressive at the time. And, well, it's no wonder in the marriage that she was in with my dad, right? She was manic depressive, but that's also a clinical issue. It's, I think my mom, that stemmed from her childhood, and who knows, I didn't really know my grandmother because my grandmother lived in Nova Scotia, like almost 3,000 miles away from where I was born, and I just got to meet her a couple times and didn't like her because I'd heard the stories about her. But she was a horrible, abusive woman, and she abused all of her children, plus a whole bunch of orphans that came to live with her, right? She was a horrible woman. And my mom, I don't know if there was already, manic depression in that side of the family, right? I just don't know. I just know that my grandmother was an abusive woman and actually was responsible for one of her own son's deaths and really was just a horrible person. So, it's no wonder my mom was manic depressive, growing up in that home and then being abused by my dad in this marriage that was just horrible and like a nightmare, really, it was for my mother and for all of us, really. And so, people might have thought that my mom was just crazy and that, she was mentally ill. And actually, and my dad did have mental illness. He was diagnosed at the time that they were brought up on charges for child abuse, that he was borderline schizophrenic at the time. But I mean, we all kind of think that they misdiagnosed him because he is totally schizophrenic. But he manages to get along, quite well. He's 87 years old. And he lives in his own little world, but he's doing good. He's in good care and everything, which is great. But the thing is he made a whole lot of people's lives miserable because he wouldn't get any help. And he could have had a great marriage, and he could have had a great relationship with his children had he got some help. And the courts ordered my parents to both get counseling and get help for their problems. And they both didn't want to do it, so they both just continued to, they faked out the social services, first of all, because they used to come over to the house and do their routine checks and stuff and come and check on us. And then we moved out of the country, and then they were able to continue their garbage. And, that's what they did. They were so used to living like that, right? But so they both seemed very much unstable and mentally ill. But a lot of it was probably because of the abuse that they experienced in their lives as well, because I know that my dad grew up in a very dysfunctional home as well. And so it's who's to say that a lot of the instability, the unstableness, the emotional issues, the mental issues were not made worse because of the abuse. It's just a horrible situation for anybody to be in. But that's what Dave Decker's saying here, that often battered women present with severe depression, anxiety, panic attacks, and low self-esteem. And it's no wonder, because if you've ever been battered, then you would know what that's like. You know what I mean? It's like it will cause you to be depressed and have panic attacks and feel have low self-esteem when you're battered emotionally, verbally, physically every day, or throughout a period of time of 20, 30 years, for in a marriage, and as a child, quite often children, by the time they're 16, 17, 18, if they're just abused in their home, will eventually take off, and leave the home, but they're still dealing with 16 years of being battered emotionally, physically. It's just absolutely horrible what this does to people. But I think that's why it's important for people to reach out, because Dave Decker says here, these symptoms frequently relate directly to the abuse, and then, that once the woman gets help and starts to feel empowered by, working with advocates and support groups and therapy, making changes to protect themselves and their children, they can move on with their lives in a healthier way. And that's so true, right? That's why we kept telling my mom to get out of the marriage, right? Because we knew she was suffering, and because we lived in the home, right? We knew what was going on. And we were telling her to get out. All of her children told her to get out. I can't imagine that there wasn't one of us that didn't tell her to get out. I actually heard from my oldest sister's lips, who was 18 years older than me. She was out, moved out, married before I was even born. She was telling my mom to get out. My oldest brother, who was a year younger than her, was telling my mom to get out. He moved out when he was 16 years old because of the abuse in the home, and he was gone by the time my brother was. My parents were brought up on charges. He was already moved out of the home, so that was five kids in the home. And as we grew up, the five that were in the home, even though we were being abused, we kept telling my mom to get out because we knew what was going on. We were part of it. We were in the violence. We were in the mess, and we saw what it was doing to her. And she was often crying at night, just speaking out in the room, not really telling any one of us, but just saying that she should kill herself. And then my dad would come along and say that he should just kill us all. And it was absolutely horrific and not a good, healthy way to live, And so, if you're experiencing this, man, make sure that if you're listening to this and you're in this situation, you make sure that you get help. There is help out there, and ultimately, right, people can't say, well, I like my mom, she gave up. Really. She could have got help. And she just gave up. She gave up on herself. She gave up on life, and she gave up on her children by allowing us to stay in a home full of violence and garbage and abuse and a lot of instability and insecurity. Right, there was not a safe home, and it was not a healthy place to grow up. And so she just gave up on life, I think, being abused as a child and then in that marriage, right? So that's why I'm saying, if you've been there and you're in that right now, you make sure that you do what you need to do to get yourself to a better situation. It is ultimately our choice as adults. As children, you can't really help it. You're being put through what you're being put through, and that's just unfortunate, especially when nobody will step in and help, and they even know the situation and they won't even help. But when you're an adult, it is your responsibility, because who else is going to do it? Nobody's going to come along and do it for you. That's what I was waiting for. I was waiting for someone to come and take my pain away. I thought somebody at some point would come and be able to take all my pain away, and that somebody could help me, and that eventually, it would be somebody else that would do this, right? I didn't take the responsibility for it myself until the age of 41, when I realized it was going to be me that was going to have to do this, and I was going to have to work to fight to stay alive and to stay healthy and not to stay healthy, but try to get healthy. That's my issue. I'm still working on it. But, to try to stay alive mainly, right, and to allow myself to heal, because, I didn't realize that I could do this, right? I thought somebody else was going to have to do this for me. And we ultimately are responsible. We have to take the first steps. We have to reach out first. We have to do this, right? It is ultimately our responsibility. My mom, it was her responsibility to reach out and get some help. And sadly enough, she didn't, and she died a very sad and broken woman. And so that's why it's very important. That's why I'm doing these shows, right? Because I've seen what it does to people all the way through to their deathbed, and I just think that no one deserves to live like that. But ultimately, as adults, we have to do what's right for ourselves, and we are the ones that are responsible for our healing journey, and we really need to get help when we need to get help. And my dad, he refused to get help too, but he's mentally ill, so he thinks life's great, right? He's just sitting around, unless he's thinking about that he should kill himself or something. But otherwise he's sitting around this little fake little pretend unreal world, and so he's been able to deal with it because of his mental illness. But it's my mom, on the other hand, was cognitive, and she knew what was going on, and so she died a very miserable woman. And so I just don't wish that on anybody. I hope that you will get some help, right? It says number 16, myth number 16, many abused women actually like the conflict and the abuse. For instance, they like the pain and chaos, and they are masochistic. I've heard this. I've actually, my sisters and brothers, my siblings have actually said this stuff about my mom, because we'd be sitting there thinking she must have been masochistic. She must have really liked to be in that situation, because she would never get herself out. And the thing is that's actually very false. That's a myth. Many abused women actually like the conflict and the abuse, and they like the pain and chaos, and they are masochistic. And the reality, Dave Decker says, no one likes being verbally or physically abused or violated in other ways, although the batterer may believe that they as a couple have been brought closer together. If the partner acquiesces to his affectionate or sexual advances in the honeymoon or deception phase due to her fear about his explosive reaction if she refuses to do what he wants, women who are raised in abusive families of origin may come to accept that this is all she can expect in a relationship or family, but that still does not mean that she enjoys the abuse and the emotional pain. So that's very interesting because that's the whole issue. Is like that's what I was talking about before, because my mom was born into an abusive home and then got into this abusive marriage, and I think she sort of thought that that's all it was ever going to be for her, even though she knew that other people were having these other better lives and better lifestyles. She thought that was just her lot in life, and she used to say, "This is my lot in life. This is what I got. This is my life, and I have to live it." And without realizing that she could have got out. Well, she wanted to divorce my dad in the 1940s, but the Canadian courts wouldn't allow it at the time because there was no infidelity. And so she told him, "Well, he's abusing me. He's abusing my children, and I want out." And they were like, "Sorry, too bad. We don't care if he's abusing you or your children. You can't leave him because you can't divorce him because there's no infidelity going on." So that's just unfortunate. So she did try to get out early in her marriage, probably I'd say about maybe 12, 13 years into the marriage, and then was told that she couldn't get out, and then just stuck it out, right, and stayed with him the whole time, and that's horrible. So that's the thing. Lots of people think that women like to be abused, and I've heard this myself, and I've probably even said it with my family members, right? Because at different points we'd all be sitting around griping and complaining about some of the abuse that was inflicted upon us, and why our mother would stay, and because we try to make sense of it, like why our mom was doing what she was doing to us, and why our parents were doing what they were doing to each other. We'd sometimes be talking about it and trying to make sense of it, and I heard other members of my family say that she just enjoyed being in that abusive relationship with my dad, and that she enjoyed that she didn't enjoy the physical abuse, but she enjoyed being in that relationship. Otherwise, she would have left, and that was our theory. But really, that's wrong. No one enjoys being abused, and what it did to her was cause her to want to kill herself. She didn't attempt to, actually, but she was very much always talking about it. And people that are talking about suicide, it's a serious thing. I didn't used to talk about suicide, but I used to plan it. And so I'd never tell anybody I was going to commit suicide, but I'd be planning my suicides, and I planned my suicide right up until I was 41 years old. And when I moved to Canada, I actually had a plan to commit suicide, and people thought I was coming to Canada for an adventure and to move on with my life, and I was actually trying to figure out a way that I could kill myself. And so, people in my own family are just so oblivious to everything, right? Because most of my siblings live in denial, right? Well, there's only 2 left now, but years back, everybody was just living in denial, right? And then 2 of my brothers killed themselves. One actually hung himself, and then the other one died of a drug overdose because he used to take massive amounts of drugs, and he did since he was like a young kid, and so he was always overdosing, and he knew those drugs would kill him eventually. He would have had to know that, right? He was just taking a slow death, right? Just a slow way out, right? And so, it's really sad when you have a whole family of people that consider suicide. One of my sisters actually years and years ago took off with a gun and disappeared for 3 days in her car. My oldest sister, who everybody thought was so stable, actually, we were concerned that she might kill herself. And then my other 2 brothers killed themselves. One of my brothers was murdered, so he doesn't count. I don't know about my other brother, if he ever tried to commit suicide. I don't think so. He's in denial. He lives his life the way that he wants to, and he's doing quite good, so that's good. My other sister, I think she's suicidal. I think she goes for drives, and I wouldn't doubt that she doesn't consider killing herself too. And this is what this stuff does to people. And this is how incredibly serious it is for people who are being abused out there, and for children who are in these homes where there's no hope and it's just hell. And it's like, you wake up you wake up in the morning, it's hell. You go to bed that night, it's still hell. You wake up the next day, it's hell. And then you go to bed that night, it's still hell. It's like it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And it really takes a toll on people. And I would hope that there's people out there who could not relate to what I'm talking about. I really do. You know what I mean? I know that somewhere there's got to be some people that actually could not relate to what I'm talking about, and that would make me extremely happy. Because, it's absolutely pathetic how many of us actually do know what this is all about. And it's very, very sad and scary. So, if you're in this situation, you make sure that you get some help. My God, we sure did not deserve that. And no one deserves to be treated like that. And I don't care who you are, what kind of situation you're in. If you're being abused and you have been abused, you make sure that you get some help and do not allow yourself to be a victim of this garbage. I'm telling you, I'm glad that I stuck around. And when I made the decision, to fight to stay alive, really, which was at the age of 41, I finally decided, I just said, that's it. I'm going to win this fight. I'm going to win. I'm not going to allow my parents and the garbage that they put on me destroy me. Absolutely not. I'm going to win. I'm going to get healthy, and I'm going to have a good life, and that's going to be a slap in the face to them because I'm going to survive this garbage that they put on me, and I'm going to do well. And so I really I really got proactive about it. And I thought, no way, I'm not going to allow them to get the better of me, because they had gotten the best of me all the way through, as a child, and being forced to endure that stuff, forced to be a part of it. And then as a teenager, and then even into my 20s and 30s, they had to be mentally so screwed up, that it's absolutely ridiculous what people do. And then lots of my family members are still in denial, and other family members, distant kind of relatives, they wouldn't even have a clue, because they didn't grow up under it, and they just think it's just such a joke, that what I'm doing and that I'm trying to heal. And I'm like, you know what, you didn't see it, you were not there, you were not part of it, you were not, thank God, you know what I mean? But don't judge until you actually walk 5 minutes in my shoes and take about some sort of a little memory walk through my mind and go back through my memories for even 5 minutes, and it would scare the crap out of you. You probably would never be the same. And so that's just the whole issue. It's very, very psychologically damaging. It's very, very hard on people. And if you're experiencing this and you're thinking that there's no hope out there and that your life is just always going to be this, this horrific leftover mess of abuse, that's actually false. But you have to take the first steps, and you have to make the first move to decide that you're going to allow yourself to heal, you're going to allow yourself to move forward, and that you don't have to put up with that abuse. No one deserves to be abused ever, and no one, so when people say, oh, these women, they actually like it, they like to be abused, that's just a cop-out attitude, just to justify abuse. I've heard people say it, oh, look, she must like that, that's why she stays in that relationship, and that is just false. There are so many issues, psychological issues, and all kinds of problems that cause women to stay in these abusive relationships. And so, because the abuser just has their mind in shackles, and they just cannot, for whatever reason, get free from that. And it's extremely sad, because they don't even have to tie these women up to chairs and keep them tied up. All they got to do is tie up their mind, shackle their mind, put a lock on it, and they got them for life. And so that's how serious this stuff is, and make sure that, you get some help if you're in this situation, right? Myth number 17, abused women will always seek out and find themselves in abusive relationships. That's what some people might think, that abused women will always seek out and find themselves in abusive relationships. And the reality is, the idea that a woman involves herself in a series of abusive relationships did not hold true in Lenore Walker's survey of battered women. Even when a woman does involve herself with another batterer, it is not always easy to tell whether he will become abusive when they first begin to date. And men often do not become violent until a commitment is made. That's right. And, for example, moving in together, becoming engaged, or getting married, right? That's the truth. You don't know we don't really know who you're getting involved with when you get involved with somebody. That's why there's a huge issue of trust, And each person has to make a commitment to the other one in the relationship, that they're not going to hurt the other person. And that when they do, they have to apologize for it, and they have to say, okay, I'm not going to do that ever again. So whatever it is they've done, whether they call you a name or just make you feel bad about something in the relationship, something happens and then all of a sudden there's hurt feelings, because it doesn't take very long after the honeymoon phase is over before people start hurting each other's feelings, right? And then it's like, oh, here we go, crap. You get to see the real person who you did not want to deal with, which is a person who could hurt you, right? And so, my biggest thing, I think, is just make sure that you know the person that you're getting involved with, and don't jump from one abusive relationship into another one until you have your boundaries set and until you have some, some help from somebody, you know what I mean? Because that can happen. Women can, abused women, who have just gotten out of these abusive marriages, abusive relationships, are longing so much for love and companionship and nurturing, and they need somebody to hold them and to tell them it's going to be okay, because obviously they weren't getting that in their abusive relationship, you know what I'm saying? So they're just craving that love and that care and affection, and so they blindly go into these other relationships without even stopping to think about who this other person is. This other person could be feeding them such a line of BS and telling them, oh, I love you, it's going to be so great. And you just, without them really actually thinking about it, they're involved in a relationship so quick that they don't even stop to think about who this person is, and then eventually, and then it could turn abusive, and then there they are in another abusive relationship. And so you want to make sure that you get some help. I know myself, I know myself that I've seen this with other people, and it hasn't happened to me, but I've seen this with other people, my sister mainly, and she divorced her abusive husband, thank God, after I don't know how many years, 12 years or something like that, or 8 years, no, more than that, 12 years. She divorced him, thank God. We were so happy when she divorced him. He's such a jerk, and treated her horribly, and she got out from underneath of him, and then subsequent boyfriend that she had for 7 years was another jerk. And, he wasn't physically abusive towards her like her other husband, but he was emotionally, psychologically abusive to her. And he was very much just using her, And she stayed in this relationship for a long time, 7 years. And she has no idea what her boundaries are. She has no idea because she grew up in the same home I did, right? She was 5 years older than me. She was very much involved in the abuse that was going on in the home as well. And so, she never did set boundaries and say, okay, I'm not ever going to let a man hurt me. I'm not ever going to let, because, she likes men. So she's like, she would not set her boundaries. Like for me, I said it flat out right. I said, man, I am never going to allow anyone to ever abuse me again. And so I put my foot down and I said, no more. I will be treated with respect, because why? I'm going to treat other people with respect. So therefore, because I'm treating other people with respect, I want that same respect back. And if the other person in my life can't do it, out the door they go. And that's just how serious you have to get about this stuff. Because, abused women, my God, here they are, abused, maybe possibly being abused as a child, and then going into an abusive relationship, and then getting out from underneath of that. Thank God they're free. Then they go right into another abusive relationship. And after a while, they start to feel that that's all they're ever going to have. I've heard this from many, many people, and I've seen it myself, witnessed it secondhand. And I know myself, you have to set boundaries, man. You have to say what you're going to allow people to do, and how you're going to have people treat you. That is very important to do that, because you need to know what you're going to allow in your life and what you're not going to allow. Because I grew up in hell, and I thought, no way am I going to allow somebody else to come along and create more hell for me. No way. And so I did put my foot down, and of course it made it hard for me to trust people, and I had a hard time in my relationship with my sweetheart, who I'm in with right now. We've been together for 15 years, and we split up after the first year together, because I wanted to be able to run. I was like, I did not trust. I couldn't bring myself to trust anybody at that time, and I needed to take some time off to myself. So I took a year off, and I did a whole lot of thinking about myself and about my situation, about the past, and about this relationship with this man. And then I phoned him back a year later, and we got back together, and I told him, I put my foot down, and I said, you will not hurt me ever. And if you do, there's the door. And I told him, I said, I will not hurt you ever. And if I do, there's the door. And we made a deal that we would never intentionally hurt each other, and that we would always be good to each other. And that was the best thing that I could have done. Absolutely. And so I hope that you will do the same thing too, and make sure that you get yourself some help. We have about a minute left. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I appreciate it very much. We're going to be on tomorrow, no, not tomorrow, but next week, talking about the rest of this article. You can go there, www.angerresources.com, and read the rest of this. There's quite a bit left. We'll pick it up Monday and finish it off probably Monday, Tuesday. There's lots of information here. I hope you will go and read this, and go check it out for yourself. It's great stuff. So take care, everybody. Have a great day. I'll be back on tonight on my show as well as Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. And if you need anything, get a hold of me on Blog Talk Radio here or on Facebook or whatnot. I'll be around today. I'm in between jobs, so I'm sort of hanging around. So have a great day. Take care of yourselves. Make sure that you don't ever give up. If you're in this situation and you're thinking, oh, well, it must be nice for her, you know what? No, it's a hard road, and you can't give up. That's what I did. I decided to not give up. I watched my whole family give up, and I watched 2 of my brothers kill themselves, and I watched my mom die and give up. Don't ever, ever, ever give up. You fight this to the end, and you win this fight. That's what I'm saying. So have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.